Hi, welcome to the public input meeting for the intersection of US 83 and North Dakota 23. Please let us know you've attended today by either signing at the back of the table, by scanning the QR code up on the screen, or by going to the website listed on your screen right now. Tonight we're going to be discussing the funding, the current project schedule, key issues and crash history of this intersection, some of the environmental requirements and the right-of-way needs, the project details, work zone traffic control, and the estimated cost. In addition, we just wanted to let you know your feedback is so important to us, and we want to hear your comments and concerns and any questions throughout this process. Our project schedule as of right now is we plan to bid it this spring of 2024, hopefully then construct it the next summer and the summer after, depending on how that schedule goes and how the contractor works it. And then also the schedule is depending upon funding. If we don't get funding, that schedule will slide. For funding, this is a federally funded project, and as of right now, 90% of it for this type of project would be paid for by the feds, 10% by the state, and the estimated cost, total cost, is $15.8 million. So one of the requirements that the feds have for us when we receive federal funding is they want to make sure that everybody who wants to give input is able to give input, and that's a good thing. But there's no way to prove that, and so they desire to have surveys done for those who participate online or in person for our public input meetings that kind of tells them a little bit about the type of people who end up coming, making sure that we have all people represented. And so that is done through these Title VI surveys. And if you would be willing to scan the QR code, or if you're in person, sign at the table, or by going to this website and fill out the anonymous survey, and it will ask you things such as race, disability, age, language, and how you heard about the public input meeting tonight. Thank you for filling it out in advance because it helps us to maintain our federal funding eligibility. So the project is the intersection of North Dakota 23 and US 83, which is one of the major roads where people travel from Minot down south or from the Newtown area to the east in North Dakota. This intersection sees about 2,800 vehicles per day, with a majority of them that are heading from the Minot area, heading to the Newtown area, and or from the south up towards Minot and even again towards the Newtown area. So as you can see here, the blue are the peak turning movements per an hour, and the white is the total per day counts. So over the last few years, this intersection has had several crashes, and many of them of the crash type that we do not want to have if there is a crash. In the last few years, there's been 10 minor crashes. Those are defined as these type of categories: property damage only, which is the PDO, possible injury, which is, or minor injury or unknown injuries is the possible injury one. The capacity injury, this is, or incapacitating injury, this is ones that occur but you'll recover from it, such as a broken arm or nose or finger, things like that. Those ones are fine if we have them. We'd rather not have any though. But these are the ones that we absolutely don't want to have on our intersections, and they are the incapacitating injuries. These are injuries that if you had this accident, you would not recover from it because you have something that permanently changes your life, such as a loss of a limb or brain damage, something along those lines, or of course fatalities, and we don't want that. So this project is set up so that we can have the types of crashes, because we can't always completely eliminate them, but it would have a high likelihood of having these types of crashes. And that's what roundabouts do, because when you have a roundabout, you end up having crash types that are more side swiping versus a direct, like a T-bone type, which is a lot of times fatal and ends up being those last two crash categories. So when we do a project, we usually have to do an environmental clearance for that project. And when we do a project, we usually have to define our study area. Right here, you see the area that is our study area. And in that, we've looked at different things such as cultural. In this case, we actually have a cultural site with the cemetery that's right there in between the two major intersections. We also have looked at wetlands in this area, and you can see there's several wetlands all over the place. And when we are doing the analysis, we have to look at the impacts of those wetlands. We also look at our right-of-way and the impacts of the right-of-way. Right now, we're trying to design the project so that we do not have any right-of-way impacts, or if there is some, that they are mostly temporary right-of-way impacts. But there may still be some permanent and or temporary impacts to the areas. If we do have to get right away, it most likely would be kind of similar to how we shown, where it would be like maybe parallel strip taking. But our goal, honestly, is to not have any if we don't need it. But in case we do, that is probably what it would end up looking like. So when we looked at the roundabout design, we looked at our design vehicle, which is a WB67, and that's like what you see a lot of times on the interstate system when you see a semi truck going out. And then we also looked at how we are to accommodate other vehicles, because at this intersection over the last 3 years, we've had approximately 18,000 permitted oversized, overweight trucks. And that includes like heavy haulers, lowboys, wind tower blades. Those are just a few examples. Houses, you name it, they've gone through that intersection. And so we want to make sure that we design the majority of the roundabouts for these types of vehicles, but we need to also make sure we can accommodate these other larger loads. So how did we have our roundabout analysis? We looked primarily at our design vehicle, that WB67, and we wanted to make sure that it could go through these intersections with relative ease. One of the first things that we wanted to make sure is that both the north-south directional traffic, like you could have two WB67s side by side, and as they were side by side on the north-south directions, they would keep their existing lane assignments, their own lane assignments. And as you can see here, the outside lanes keep their own lane assignments, and then the inside lanes end up utilizing a portion of the truck apron, which is exactly what those are designed for. This is the north to east movement and the vehicle tracking of the WB67. This is the south to west movement and the vehicle tracking, the west to east movement and the vehicle tracking, the east to west movement and the vehicle tracking, the north to west and the south to east movement and the vehicle tracking, the east to south movement and the vehicle tracking. Again, this is for that WB67, and like you can see here, when you do that left movement, they are going to be using a little bit of the truck apron, but that is how those are designed. That's what they're for, and at times they end up using some of the truck blisters also, but the majority of the time they are on the lane assignments. This is the west to north movement, again similar to the previous one, and then the west to south and the east to north movements. So we wanted to show you what it's like to have these vehicles go through this intersection, and this is an example of a semi that goes through. You can also see some of these other vehicles. Some of them are just continuing on. Some actually go into the roundabout. Those who are coming into the roundabout always yield to the existing traffic and go on through. I'm going to play really quick that semi one more time, because as the semi comes around the roundabout in this area, you'll watch that they track a little bit on the back tires, and that's what we anticipate happening. That's what that truck apron is actually for, is that movement. So as previously identified, we designed the roundabout for that WB67. But as we mentioned, we have over 18,000 oversized, overweight loads that need to be accommodated for this roundabout at different times. On average, that's about 16 of these loads per day that have to go through this intersection, which is quite a bit. And so we wanted to also make sure that this design could accommodate those larger loads. And we wanted to look at all of the different movements with some of those larger vehicles. We didn't look at every vehicle because that's 16,000 of them, but we tried to take a broad range of them, and these are just a few of them. And then we also looked at what is the most constraining movement, which is most likely that left-hand movement, which would be like from the south to the west or from the north to the east. And so we looked at how that operates when it comes to these oversized, overweight loads. So this is the lane assignments and the tracking that occurs with that accommodated vehicle. This is for the lowboy. You can see the tracking of it, and this is for the heavy hauler. And what we did, you can see here, we went through the roundabout backwards. Your normal way would come in here, and then you would do this and come through. But these larger vehicles, this is too small to go the normal way. And so we have a different movement that they would end up using, which would be using it backwards in this area and coming through. So the way we designed this is so that those vehicles could go over this on those heavy haulers. And most likely when a situation like this happens, there's pilot cars and those different types of things. And so when they come into this intersection, those pilot cars and everything would have to shut the intersection down to get those vehicles through, and then they would continue their movements. So here is the most difficult movement, which is the left movement, and this is the example of the north to east. We did look at all of them, but south to west, and then this is the lowboy example and the heavy hauler example. So one of the things that we have to look at and consider is how to do the work zone traffic control while the construction is being done, and how to make sure we can get as much traffic moving as possible. For this project, because a majority of the work is right in the middle, we need to do it in a way where we don't have to get into this middle intersection of the road. And one of the things that we looked at doing was adding parallel roads. So while the work is being done on this west, a side parallel road would be used. Another avenue is using turnarounds, and so we have this parallel road here being used, and then if you need to, say, get to the east, you would do this turnaround and come, or if you need to go to the north, instead of coming through and going up, you have to come down here and then go up, or the other way around. If you need to go south and say you're coming from the east, you would come up here and then come down. So there will be a season where vehicles have to essentially go opposite direction for a short period of time until they get into the right direction and essentially go into those turnarounds. There also will be a season when this east portion is being constructed that a detour will be needed, and we'll go into that in a little bit while. So for the north turnaround, it would look something like this. And the south turnaround would look something like this. And then for the phasing, one of the first phases would be doing all of this interior work with the roundabouts themselves, and then we would have a parallel road where it's just a single lane on both sides so that the vehicles can go throughout. The east and west traffic are able to also run as normal, as much as possible during construction. You call normal, and while this work is being done. The next phase, which is phase 1B, is where we will end up having the roads still have a little bit of stuff. On the west side, we would have this mostly open still. This is for phase 1A, and then phase 1B is where just this chicane is being constructed and these connection parts are being constructed. Phase 1A is on the east side, consists of being able to construct the inner portions of the roundabout, but the chicane for the east side is not able to be made until we implement a detour, which the detour is then for phase 1B, and that is when we end up having a leave out here, construct the chicane, and the people who want to go east would have to actually come down to Max over on 53 and then back up onto 23 to continue their route. That detour length is approximately 40 miles long to be able to construct that, and we're looking at having it for approximately 4 to 6 weeks for construction. And here's a view of the detour again going down to Max and then over. For phase 2, the work zone traffic control is to get these leave out locations then paved, and the phase 2 west would look like this, where you would end up having a connection kind of from where it was before out to the roundabout. They would end up using the roundabout like normal while they're constructing this area. For the phase 2 east, that's for connecting this little part in here. The traffic control would primarily use the main roundabout in the area, but unfortunately we do not have enough space to be able to do parallel roads, and so we again will have to have a detour to finish this little connections, and again that's part of that 4 to 6 week connections for the detour. Other components on this project, just on the south part as this northbound lane is going up, there's a little bit of grade differential, and so we want to shift the alignment and fix some of the grade going on in this area. Another thing that we are needing to do is closing this eastern approach here, but this one to the cemetery will remain open. In addition, we will be needing to have borrow and waste sites. And so if you have property in the area or pretty close to this project location, we would love for you to contact us. One of the ways you can is by scanning this QR code, and then inside just give us your name and contact information and say you're interested in a borrow and or waste site. Thank you again for your time this evening and for your time online. And we appreciate any comments that you might have. Well, the reason we're here is because we desire your comments. Please send us your feedback, and you can do this several ways. If you're in person, you can do it by filling out the information at the table, or you can scan the QR code on the screen, or you can go to the website that you see there. Another way you can do it is by emailing me at jleinram@nd.gov. That's JLEINREM@nd.gov. Please note in your subject heading US 8323 Public Input Meeting. Or another way you can do it is by sending in handwritten comments, and you can do so by making sure they're postmarked by December 21st. Attention, Jen Ainram, North Dakota Department of Transportation, at 608 East Boulevard Avenue, Bismarck, North Dakota, 58505-0700. Please also note on your handwritten documents the US 83 ND 23 intersection public input meeting in your letter heading. If you're live, any questions you can also send to that same QR code. Thank you. Larger loads. So how did we have our roundabout analysis? We looked primarily at our design vehicle, that WB67, and we wanted to make sure that it could go through these intersections with relative ease.